So my name's Tipper, and today we're going to be talking about Appalachian language. I have the Dictionary of Smoky Mountain English, and we're going to be talking about words that begin with C. So one of the first entries we're going to talk about is a cakewalk. A cakewalk is usually held to raise money for someone in need, and I've been to cakewalks my whole life. They're very common in my area of Appalachia where I live, but this is what the dictionary has to say about it. So a cakewalk or a cakewalking is a noun, a social event often held at a box supper or a pie supper in which participants march in a circle until the music stops, at which time one of them wins a cake. So in 1940, Hans Hawks Dunn, Joe took Tiny to a cakewalking over at Holloway's church one night. 1984, Severe Settler, the cakewalk was a big event. The pie supper, at the pie supper, the women would bake their cakes, then the participants would gather in a circle, walk around and around until the auctioneer said stop, and whoever stopped on the magic spot won the cake. Cakewalks are lots of fun, and so many ladies are like known for their special cakes, and they'll make them and then they'll donate them, so they're really people really like to win those cakewalks when they know which cake is up for being auctioned off. So another one, this is really interesting, one that I've heard all my life. I'll be interested to see if you've heard this one. It's more of a phrase, which is calf rope. So it's it's an interjection according to the dictionary, and it means enough. I've had enough, quit. So when I was little, if maybe Pap was wrestling with one of the boys or in a situation like that, when they'd had enough, you know, just playing, not really wrestling. Wrestling is how we would say it. But one of them might yell calf rope. That means I give up. I stop, I can't take it no more. I give up. So it's usually in good natured, like I said, but this is what the dictionary says. Enough, I give up. A signal of good natured surrender in a contest, especially wrestling or children's games. So I was right on the money for the wrestling, as we would say. 1955, Paris, Roman Mountains. Nathan was judged the winner in bout after bout, with his opponent shouting calf rope, the mountain equivalent of enough. 1966, it's just documented, called to quit by one who is losing a fight, most often in wrestling. Burns, North Carolina, Cherokee, North Carolina, and Gatlinburg, Tennessee. It was known in all those places. Another good one, this one actually call, so C-A-L-L, call. There's different variations of it, but I'm just going to share this one. So it's a noun, a reason, or occasion, or duty. So especially phrase no call for or no call to. You'll hear that, like if somebody said, well, he just got mad and left, and somebody'd say, well, there's no call for him to act like that. He should have just talked it out and we could have worked things out, you know. But this is what the dictionary says. So a noun, a reason, occasion, duty. I've already read that. 1940, Cape Art notebooks. He had no call to do it. 1913, Cape Art, our Southern Highlanders. Many common English words are used in peculiar senses by the mountain folk as call for name or mention or occasion. 1956, Hall Collection, Mount Sterling, North Carolina. He had no call to practice, whatever he was practicing, I don't know. 1962, Dykeman, Tall Woman. There'll be no call for you to do anything you don't want to do. So that one's still very common in my area of Appalachia. This is a funny one that I've never heard this one, but I've seen it in the dictionary and I really like it. So it's to call the hogs. Well, sometimes you're literally calling the hogs if you want them to come eat, but this says call the hogs is a verb phrase which means to snore loudly. So somebody that snores loudly is calling the hogs. And that was 1957 or 1995. The Montgomery collection was known to Brewer, Brown, and Weaver. I can't sleep in that room tonight because he called the hogs all last night. So that was somebody that really was snoring up a storm, I guess. This one's really interesting. I've never heard this one either. Call to straw. So if you're called to straw, that's a verb phrase, and it means to confine to bed in late pregnancy. I've never heard that one. That one's really interesting. So 1940, Hans Hawks Dunn. She was 2 months called to straw and easy to upset. So she was pregnant, I guess, and easily upset is what they were saying. But I've never heard that one. Please tell me if you've ever heard that one. Call to straw, which means to confine to bed in late pregnancy. All you turkey hunters out there may know this one. Call up is a verb phrase to lure an animal by imitating its call, attract so as to shoot. 1939 Hall Collection, Deep Creek, North Carolina. Some of the lufty fellows had told me about this gobbler, a goblin there, and they couldn't call him up. And I hardly ever failed back then on calling up a turkey. It's the way you call that brings them. If you call too much, you'll never get one to ye. So that must have been an expert turkey hunter talking about that one. A camp meeting, if you're familiar with a camp meeting, I am. They have them here. So it's a noun, an annual series of open-air religious services held in summer at an encampment, most often by Methodists, until the middle of the 20th century. More recently, the services have been held under a tent and called a tent meeting or simply revival, on church grounds or at a central location in the community. Sometimes non-denominational, they are now sponsored especially by Baptist, Methodist, and the Church of God. So let's see, 1998 Montgomery Collection, still held by Church of God and by Baptist. That was Adams that said that. Most were undenominational, usually lasting 3 or 4 days, but I knew of one to go 30 days. And nowadays they are usually called tent meetings, and that was Brown, held by Baptist and Methodist. Bush documented that. Mostly Baptist and Methodist held camp meetings, later called revivals. So that's an interesting one. This next one is very common here, but I'm not a grammar expert at all. I love the words and I love the phrases, but I'm by no means educated when it comes to grammar. Of course, I had grammar in school, but that's been a long time ago. But this is about the word can, so C-A-N. So this is the usage it's documenting. To invert with the subject in a negative clause, in which case there optionally introduces the clause. So that was the grammar usage, that this is unusual, it's saying. 1924, can't nary one of us read no kind of writing nor printing, but we can recollect the main idea of it if you'll read it off. So see, I wouldn't say the part about not being able to read or write, because of course I would be able to do that, but that using can't or can like that, I would do that today. So I might say, can't none of us, what would I say? Can't none of us play the saxophone. We can play the guitar and the fiddle and even the piano, but can't none of us play the banjo. I might say it like that. So that one's still common. 1939 Burnett Gap of Mountains. Can't nobody deny that old Spot was glad to see you, said Mose. His annex sure proved he was a dog. 1942 Thomas Blue Ridge. Can't no one keep me and little Sid apart from this day on. 1981 Last Man, he's stubborn and wild, Ephraim said. There can't nobody ride him. So see, that's really common. I might say talking about somebody like a little kid that was rambunctious or something. Can't nobody do nothing with them. They're just a mess. So that use of can or can't in the examples is really common here. So I'll be interested to see if that is unusual where you live. So a candy roaster, if you've ever heard of a candy roaster, I grow candy roasters every year in my garden. I really love them. So a candy roaster is a noun, a large squash similar in color to a pumpkin, but sweeter and often cooked into pies and cakes or made into a sauce or butter. And they are. Candy roasters are so good. I actually prefer them over pumpkins. 1925, Dargan, Highland Annals. I went calmly through the orchard, picking my way over the fallen fruit that no hand would rescue from decay, looked unwistfully at the pumpkins, cushaws, and candy roasters that would feed nothing but the frost, which that's a shame. I wish somebody had been there to eat them, huh? So 1996, the Montgomery Collection documented Adams, Brown, and Letford all said a candy roaster was a large squash used to make pies larger and sweeter than a pumpkin, about the size and shape of a small watermelon, the skin of which is similar in color and texture to a butternut squash. So if you've never had candy roaster, they're really good. So a cane patch is a cultivated area of sorghum cane. If you've ever had sorghum syrup, that's my favorite. It'd be hard for me to say if I would rather have sorghum syrup or honey. When I was growing up, Pap, at one time he drove an oil truck, so he was out and about all the time. And there were certain times of the year that he would bring home a box full of syrup. We just called it syrup, not sorghum syrup, and a box full of honey. And then we would have that with breakfast. So mostly I remember me and Pap liked sorghum. I don't know, or syrup. We just called it syrup, but it was sorghum syrup more so than honey. I really liked honey though too, but I don't really remember anybody else eating the syrup besides me and Pat. Maybe Granny and Paul and Steve did, but anyway, I really to this day love sorghum syrup. Syrup is what we would call it. The 1956 Hall collection, Cosby, Tennessee. People would make sorghum molasses by the barrelful. The cane patch had to be raised every year. They needed sweetening for bread. So in those days they used that syrup a lot to sweeten. Sometimes you'll hear it called long sweetening or short sweetening. There's two different ones, and I can't remember now which is sugar and which is syrup. But syrup was used a lot for sweetening in those days. Can house. See, this is one that I can't imagine is not common all throughout the United States, but it is documented as being unusual in the dictionary. But so a can house is a noun, a cellar, storage room, or freestanding structure in which canned fruits and vegetables, jellies, and other foods are stored, especially for winter consumption. 1975, Jackson, unusual words. Women would dry apple slices and beans and store them in the loft of the house or in the sass hole, also known as the root cellar or can house, and they would be ready for use during the winter. 1996, Foods and Recipes. The mason jar was patented in 1858, and once the glass cans or jars became available in the mountains, women put up gallons upon gallons of fruits and vegetables and lined them up in neat rows in the can house or cellar. I think that's one of the prettiest sights ever, to see those jeweled jars sitting on your can house shelves, whether you've got a can house or a basement or a pantry or whatever you've got. That's just a beautiful sight to see those lovely colors of your harvest from the year before. When you're talking about Southern speech and Appalachian speech, the one that almost always comes up is care. I don't care to. So this is what the dictionary says about that one. It's a verb, to be willing or agreeable to, usually used in the phrase, I don't care to, a response to a suggestion or invitation. The verb may range in sense from the understatement, not to mind if one does, to be to the other end of the spectrum, to be pleased if one does. So that's gets confused sometimes, because Granny would say, do you want to come down here and help me? I'm going to clean out the back room and there might be some stuff that you want. And I'll say, yeah, I don't care to. So some people might think, well, that means you don't want to. But no, I mean, sure, I don't care to at all. I'll be right there, because who knows what kind of treasure Granny's got back there. You know, I'm really excited about it. I'll come. So here's some examples. 1929, Chapman, Mountains Man. I don't care for work means I like to work. I don't mind working. And I'd not care to drive a car means I'm not afraid to. I'd like to drive a car. Yet outlanders who have lived years in the mountains are still taking these comments in the modern sense and advertising that the mountain man is lazy and that he is shy of modern invention. So there's just a miscommunication is what that is, where the mountain man is saying I don't care to, which means sure, I'd like to, and the person that doesn't understand thinks they mean, well, I don't want to. No, I don't want to do that. Why would I do that? So that one's almost any kind of series or special about Southern or unique Southern or Appalachian language, that one comes up a lot. I don't care to. So this next one is one I get asked about a lot of times. People email me or message me and say, do you know about this word, Cyarn? My grandma used to say it, or my mama used to say it, or my papa used to say it, or something. So different places in Appalachia, you'll hear it said slightly differently. Here, what I've heard is Cyarn, or Cyarny. So here's the dictionary says, so it's actually carrion, like a dead animal, a rotting dead animal, you know, something dead that's rotting. So variant forms, Cyarn, corn, or corn, see, it gets hard, Cyarny, hard to say. Cyarn is the way that I've heard it most. 1913, Cape Art, our Southern Highlanders. Occasionally a word is both added to and clipped from, such as Cyarn. 1939, Hall Notebook, White Oak, North Carolina. Cyarn equals carrion, that's Faye Leatherwood. 1940, Hans Hawks Dunn. Meady said she didn't blame Bert any more than she blamed a buzzard for eating Cyarn. So buzzards do eat Cyarn. That'll be interesting. Please let me know if you've heard, if somebody talking about something that smells really bad or is really disgusting, like that's Cyarn or that's Cyarny. So please let me know if you know that one. See, this one's interesting. You'll hear people here use this, older folks especially, but talking about carry. So it is just carry, but it means to accompany, guide, escort, or drive someone. So you might hear somebody say, I had to carry Granny over to Franklin last week for the doctor's appointment that she had. Well, they didn't literally carry her, of course, they drove her, but we say carry. So 1913, Capar, our Southern Highlanders, when a mountain swan carries his gal to meeting, he is not performing so great an athletic feat. In other words, he's not carrying her to meeting, he's just taking her. He carried her to church, so he didn't actually carry her, he just drove her or took her. So that one's interesting. I'll be interested to know if you're familiar with using carry in that manner. This is one I really like that I did not grow up hearing this. I've never heard it, except I read it in a book, and then one of my blind pig readers shared it with me. So it's caution, like caution. But instead of using it in the manner like danger, caution, be careful, you know, that sort, it's a different usage totally. So caution is a noun, and it's a great wonder, an unusual event, an unusual or amusing person. So 1963, Edwards. Teacher Bowers was what the people in our community would call a case or a caution. Now he's a case, I tell you, or he's a caution, from all the children say. 1996 and 97, Montgomery collection, he was a regular caution. 1998, that boy's a caution meant that you just never knew what he might do. So I grew up saying, I could hear that, he's a case, I've heard that a lot, or he's a mess, or something like that, but never caution. I really love that usage though, so I'll be interested to see if you're familiar with that one. Let's see, certain, which is just certain, but sometimes you'll hear people say sartin, so it's like, it's just a different way of saying it, it's just an accent, sartin. So instead of C-E-R-T-A-I-N, it's said like S-A-R-T-I-N. So 1797, that was a long time ago, Sinking Creek Minutes, this church doth excommunicate John Carr on sartin charges. Oh, that was bad, whatever happened to him. Let's go all the way to 1969, Shakespeare's America. I thought surely, undoubtedly, of a sartin it were so. You will hear perhaps of a rumor believed and found in relief not to be true. So they heard something and they thought for certain it was true, but then in relief they found out it was not true. So as you can tell, I for certain like to talk about Appalachian language. It's one of my favorite things to do. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you'll share which words you were familiar with, or any kind of stories or comments you've got about the ones, or maybe the ones you've never even heard of, which ones you thought were unusual or which ones you really enjoyed learning more about. But mostly I just hope you'll drop back by often as I celebrate Appalachia.